Thank you. So we're 5 minutes in. Let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Neha Kumar, and I'm SIGCHI president, and I'm hosting and moderating for us today. So our agenda for today's session is going over the news and updates. We will not go into too much detail, but we do have more detail that we will share with you via email shortly after. Luigi De Rusis, who's the VP Finance, is going to go over the budget for the next fiscal year. And then we have Caroline Atten, who's going to talk about the post-CHI 2023 survey. And then we have a short video that we'll play for you regarding the CHI 25 open calls. Because both the CHI 25 general chairs weren't able to make it, but they did record this video for us. And we'll try to maximize the time that we have for the Q&A after. So you can keep dropping questions in the chat. If you want to be anonymous, you can drop questions in the Slido, so you have access to both of those spaces, and we'll drop a link to the Slido again in a few minutes maybe. And we'll also have time, if you just want to raise your hand after we're done with the presentations, then we can just have some conversation then. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So news and updates, and we'll start with just a quick 1-minute intro to SIGCHI and what SIGCHI is. So I'll hand it over to Andrew for that.
Thanks, Neha. So just a reminder, so this is a community of 26 conferences with over 4,000 members, and in fact, 13,000 attendees to these 26 conferences. And if you look at the next slide, that shows the executive committee. So the people who are in charge of working with you, with the volunteers in making sure these conferences move forward. And in fact, the next slide shows you how the individuals on the executive committee are tied to a variety of committees and a variety of activities within SIGCHI. And with that, back to Neha.
Thank you, Andrew. So we wanted to give you a quick overview of what's going on. And we did ask everyone to prepare a slide on their committee's updates. And we realized that that was going to take much longer than we had anticipated. And so we decided that we'll give you a quick snapshot in these next few slides, and then share with you the detailed slides. So first, talking about conferences and publications, which is one of 3 key clusters that we've been working on. So evolution of conferences. We've been looking at growing our conferences. As you know, we have added on 2 in the last couple of years. We're also going to be adding on, potentially adding on a couple more this year. And we wanted to be intentional about how we're thinking about both breadth and depth and ensuring meaningful growth. So there's a blog post that we're working on that we'll share with you to just present our thoughts on this. Then we're also working on guidelines for conference leadership, specifically around compliance with code of conduct. With regards to supporting hybrid, we did a couple of SIGs on this in the last 2 CHIs, and also we have a hybrid working group that is working on producing a checklist that conferences can use if they want to provide a low-cost hybrid experience at a minimum, and then also collating resources for those who'd like to do more, and a survey of our own recent conferences to see what our conferences have been offering in that space. Then with regards to supporting authors, we have our publications committee that has been working to make policies more transparent, to make our pubs accessible. We are organizing a summit for peer review, so to think about our intellectual contributions through our conference communities. And then Havchuan is also leading a working group on mini courses to introduce newcomers to our conferences, to ethics, to the peer review process, and such, so that they are able to get onboarded more easily. And then we have new leadership for interactions, which is, you may have heard already, Elizabeth Churchill and Mikhail Weber. Next slide, please. And then the next thing that we've been focusing on is just our global presence, our identity as a global organization. And there have been changes in our membership, which I'll share the links for our blog posts that denote that. But this touches on our chapters. And so we've been looking at growing our local and thematic chapter presence, having richer information sharing from chapter to chapter, and also just visualizing what our chapters are up to, and then extending more support in terms of funds, but also more than funds, just in terms of community engagement. And Matt Jones is leading those efforts with his chapters committee. And then we have regional committees. So the Asia Regional Committee has been around for more than 10 years. We set up the Latin America committee that Adriana is leading, and that's been around for around two plus years. We're also in the process of forming the MedCai community, and I think there's some folks here who will be working on that. And then also hoping to have more activity in Africa. So there's going to be an African Leadership Summit in a couple of months that we're also supporting. Next slide, please. And then on the people front, so this includes individuals, but also communities and also the planet. So under volunteering, we have a new volunteer support chair, and we've been looking at membership changes. Our community is getting younger in that we have more students, we have more early career professionals, and we want to be able to support their activities in the community. We have open calls for volunteering, and we've been trying to offer guidance on open calls to all of our conference communities. We're also developing a volunteers handbook just to formalize some of our volunteering expectations across our committees and conferences and chapters. On the community support front, so we have the Gary Marsden Travel Awards that have funded 245 individuals. This includes students, but also non-students or professionals, and up to $480,000 last year. And then the development fund, which has been enriched by including conferences, including chapters. You can see there's a new definition for the development fund that we have online on our submittable page, and that has supported 34 projects for $206,000. And then we also have event guidelines, which have been put together basically to support our events. It's not to say that you have to do these things to make your events accessible or sustainable, but if you want to make your events accessible, sustainable, etc., then these are some guidelines that you could follow. And then Futuring is a committee that Navina Karasala is leading, and this includes our early career researchers and practitioners, and they're working on 3 projects. One of them looks at expanding HCI awareness across the globe. A second looks at diversifying formats in which we share knowledge. And a third is around supporting new scholar communities across the world. On the sustainability front, we have a very active sustainability committee. Nick Bedwell has been leading that. And we recently set up a mailing list, which I had mailed SIGCHI members about. So you're welcome to join that. At present, I think we have about 150 to 200 members. We're also looking at tree stamps or something like it, but basically to build consciousness around sustainability matters and the implications regarding sustainability of the work that we do. We're also developing site selection guidelines for our conferences and have been having conversations with our conferences about that. And then blog series on bringing sustainability to our HCI practice. On communications, the comms committee led by VP Comms Simone Kriegelstein has been looking at SIGCHI months. So really making the work and the workers visible, and on the community front, also bringing out the diversity of our work practices, the people who make up the community. We're also putting together a new SIGCHI bulletin, which we're calling the SIGCHI Quarterly for now. And this is basically to build up history such that, when we turn 50, in 9 years' time, we will have some posts that we can come back to look at SIGCHI history. And then partnerships. Susan Gray and Keith Instone have been leading our partnerships efforts to build ties with practitioner communities and also HCI adjacent disciplines. Under education, we have a new chair, Duncan Brumby, and we're going to have open calls soon to recruit people into the education committee. And next slide, please. So all of what I've talked about can be read about in more detail, either in existing posts from the last few months, but also in upcoming posts. And you could go to the medium.com/SIGCHI publication for that. Of course, if you want to read about membership, you can check out our website. And then all of our programs, for instance, the Gary Marsden Travel Awards, are all our open calls. They are on SIGCHI.submittable.com, and you can also apply for the SIGCHI Development Fund funding. And then monthly, we do organize open meetings where we talk about the ongoing initiatives, and you're all welcome to attend. So with that, I'm going to close on this segment of our town hall and hand it over to Caroline to talk about the Guy 23 survey.
Okay. Next slide, please. You don't want to do the budget first, right?
It was the budget, actually. Did we lose the slide? What? Or did I mess up? Sorry.
I see here, hold on one second. There is the budget was first, so I'm not sure. One second, let me look it up here. This was, yeah, so it was.
Yeah, there is the budget first.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was just me. All right, sorry. So we have our VP Finance talking about our budget before we ask Caroline to present the survey results. So go ahead, Luigi.
Oh, yes, thank you. Sorry for the exchange. So briefly, I'm going to cover the SIGCHI budget for the next fiscal year. So every year in February, March, ACM asks all FIGs to produce the budget and makes X dollars, US dollar, available to the SIG, in this case to SIGCHI, for spending, together with some projection of the expenses, the expected revenues, etc. The fiscal year starts, just for clarity, on the 1st of July and then on the 30th of June. So we are now 2 days before the next fiscal year starts. So this is a presentation about the next fiscal year, the one that again starts in 2 days. So what is the SIGCHI budget? So the SIGCHI budget has two big flows. Clearly, one is the one that brings in money, the revenues, and the revenues are mainly the conference revenues. So we have 26 conferences, each of them has some income. So these are the 26 conference, the revenues, the downloads from the digital library, and any membership dues that we have from the membership. The other flow is what takes the money out, and clearly the money outs are taken from the conference expenses, that are the expenses that conferences need to have to run the conference successfully, the expenses that the EC put in place for running the programs and the initiative that DC proposed, that are then represented in a few slides, and the ACM overhead, that is, let's say, to simplify, a sort of taxation that the ACM apply to every dollar we spend as SIGCHI, so conferences and DC. So these are the two main flows. In the next slide, these flows are represented for the next fiscal year with the grand total. So SIGCHI is projected to have $4.3 million in, let's say, in the bank account at the beginning of the fiscal year. That is, as you can imagine, quite a lot of money. We cannot technically go to zero with this amount, because the ACM has some rules so that we are always able to cover 50% of all our expenses. So since our expenses for the next fiscal year is 8.5 million, we cannot go much under the 4.3 million that we currently have. So for the next fiscal year, the expenses are, that is again, conference expenses, EC expenses, ACM overhead are around 8.5 million, and the income that arrive from, again, conference incomes, downloads from the digital library, and membership fees are expected to be 7.7 million. As you can see, we are also for this year, as we did for the past year, spending a little bit more than we get. And this is the SIAM that allow all the SIGs to have this flexibility within, again, the rules that the SIAM has to use this money. And this is what we're going to do and what we did to support, to create more program, to put more money in the program, in the initiative that the EC is doing. For instance, the Development Fund and the Gary Masenthal Award that Nea mentioned before. So what are these EC expenses? In the next slide, I categorized the main areas in which we spend the, let's say, the money from the EC perspective. So these exclude the expenses from the conferences, etc., because they are separate budgets in a certain moments that needs to actually run the conference. As you can see, the majority of the expenses are around support for our conferences through, for instance, PCS, T-Event, and the program app. And then there are other things like general expenses that are contract, the Zoom license, the committees, the various committees, travel and meetings, etc., that account for 18% of the total budget or the total expenses for the next fiscal year. Community support is another significant chunk of money that is $260,000. It's around 11%. And it's mainly this Development Fund and the Gary Masenthal Award that the Development Fund is open to all the SIGCHI member, while the Gary Masenthal Award is still open to all SIGCHI members for attending SIGCHI sponsored conferences. Except for that, you can see that there are other voices here, just to focus on a few of them, and some community-focused initiative that account for 10% of the budget, like the summit, or the project that the Futuring SIGCHI committee will start soon to do, or awards, $80,000 for supporting the SIGCHI awards, or just to mention other, $48,000 for sustainability fund, $58,000 for support for chapters, $65,000 for support for accessibility. That means the fund for accessibility, again, mainly for conferences and also for the PDF remediation. So to make PDF accessible on the digital library. And other areas are like the regional committees and the CHI organization for CHI, the steering committee meeting, etc., that accounts each of them $50,000. And another area that it was mentioned the other day was the President Discretionary Fund that account $50,000, and the President Discretionary Fund is not, well, it's a fund that we keep separate from the other for any, let's say, emergency spending. So we keep this $50,000 to be able to give this $50,000 in areas that in a specific moment of time may need. And it's President discretionary because it's at the discretion, in theory, of the president to decide where to move. And then often in the past, it was moved toward accessibility, towards supporting accessibility requests, mainly from conferences. This is, again, a short overview of the budget. We will publish a blog post on Medium with more details, more information, but just for the sake of conciseness and remain in 5 minutes, this is the overview. I just want to take 30 seconds to reply to one question that we had on Slido the other day that was from Regan. Do you have plans to deal with the loss of income from digital library download when the SCM changed the publication model to the open access model? And because one of the income that I mentioned before was the downloads from the digital library. The SEM is figuring out what to do, but the idea is that they want to replace the income from the digital library with some other incomes in the new model. So they still want to give their SIGs some percentage of the revenues from the digital library according to the new role, the new model that they are thinking of for the open access. So we are in touch with the SEM, and as soon as they have more precise information, we can then give also you more information and understand how this is going to change and to impact the overall income. And just to reply to the message in chat, no, they have not yet said how the percentage will be decided. They're still deciding a lot of things, including this. And for this, I will now pass to Caroline for the CHI 23 survey.
So, next slide. So, hi, I'm Caroline Appert. I'm a member of the CHI steering committee, and more particularly, I take care of all data-related matters. So, as you may know, CHI traditionally runs a survey after the conference, and I will present the results that we got for this year. So the survey ran for 2 weeks after the conference, and you can see 2 peaks in the distribution of responses, and that corresponds to the reminder that we sent. And overall, we got 832 respondents, which represent around 17% of the CHI attendees, which were close to 5,000. Next slide, please. So here we can see the distribution between respondents who attended the conference in person, in green, and those who attended virtually, in blue. So we have around 10% of the respondents who attended the conference virtually, which is a bit less than the actual percentage of virtual attendance, which was around 17% this year. Next slide. So here we can see how people answered the general question, how valuable was your CHI experience? So we can see a clear breakdown by attendance type. On the left, we see the feedback from on-site attendees, and on the right, we see feedback from the virtual attendees. So on the left, it's quite clear that on-site attendance was much appreciated, and mostly because of the value of networking and the quality of science at the conference. So on the right, it's a bit different. So it's feedback from virtual attendees, which is much less positive. We can see a large portion of red here, and based on the comments, it's quite clear that people were particularly unhappy because, among others, because remote presenters did not get any visibility on site, and also because remote attendees couldn't interact with other attendees and thus felt quite isolated. Next slide. So in this slide, you can see a lot of charts. So I will just give the general message. So you see how people graded the keynotes and the different venues at the conference, so papers, demos, panels, and so on. And what's important here is that there is a lot of blue, which means that the appreciation was overall positive and there is not a big difference across venues. There were just some things that is worth mentioning in the free comments about the posters. So typically, a lot of respondents mentioned that the layout of the hall was a bit confusing and that the program was not leaving enough space for posters. And yes, people also complained about the fact how hybrid was handled in some of these sessions. Next slide. So here we see how people graded the events at the conference, such as the receptions, job fair, or the town halls. And we can see what is remarkable is that we have some red in the job fair chart. And in the free comments, what we could read is that people actually reported that not much was happening there and they didn't really get the purpose of that. Also, regarding the town halls, people would have liked more time dedicated to discussing important points, such as the environmental costs related to the conference location. Next slide. And here is how people graded the tools and types of content at the conference. So overall, people liked the sessions on site quite a lot. And of course, grades for streamed and recorded content were lower, and likely because there was not much of such content. Here again, they were particularly unhappy about the choice of not playing the videos of remote presenters during the sessions on site. And also about the PWA, which is the web app for navigating the program. So some people were super happy about it and liked it a lot. And while other people were quite unhappy about it, and they were listing various usability concerns. So I would say that it is not super surprising for a community like ours that typically has high expectations. Next slide, please. So here, that's a slide that actually present the results to 4 similar questions that were about the duration of pre-recorded videos for both papers, which were typically 7 to 10 minutes long, and posters, which were 30 minutes long. So what we can see here is that there is a large portion of gray on the bars, and gray represents the answers did not watch or present. So this basically means that a large proportion of attendees don't watch those videos. And this is particularly true for posters. However, in the comments, there was quite a lot of positive comments mentioning that they like those videos because they can consume them asynchronously. Also, something significant is are the people who mentioned the amount of work that producing videos represents for presenters. And in the free here again, we had some complaints about the fact that those videos were not played during sessions for remote presenters. Otherwise, if we focus on the specific question about the duration of videos, we can see a large portion of green in the bars, which means that the duration of videos seems good. So a few people wanted longer videos, but mostly it was the duration was okay for most of them. Next slide. So now we will see a series of slides that we designed to actually gather feedback about the selection process at CHI. And in particular, we were interested in the comparison between the previous system based on rebuttals and the current system based on revise and resubmit. So in this first question was designed to capture how much the respondents were aware of the systems. So we can see that we have a majority of respondents, so more than 40%, who are familiar with both systems and are thus able to make comparisons between them. Next slide. So in here we can see detailed comparisons of the comparison of the 2 systems along different criteria. So on the top line, we consider the quality of papers, the quality of the dialogue between authors and reviewers, and the quality of reviews. So red bars, which is probably not the best choice in terms of color. So red bars are when rebuttals are considered better. Yellow bars are when R&R is considered better, and orange means no difference. So overall, we can see that authors perceive the quality of papers, reviews, and dialogue better with R&R than with rebuttals. On the bottom line, we see other criterions, and we can see a criteria, and we actually see the drawbacks of R&R. So here we have evaluations regarding the workload for authors, the workload for reviewers, and for program committee members. So here we see a trend that is clearly the opposite than that of the top line, with large red bars, which mean that R&R, when compared to rebuttals, increases the workload for everyone with an actor in the process. Next slide. So, and to conclude on this section, we asked the general question, overall, what system do you prefer? And the conclusion is that we have 20% in favor of rebuttals, 40% in favor of R&R, and 40% who do not express any preference. Next slide. Now we can see the answers to the questions related to accessibility. So on top, we can see that some of our attendees actually asked for some accessibility related features. On the bottom, we explicitly ask whether attendees went through negative experience in terms of accessibility. And in blue, it's when everything was okay. In orange, it's when there were some difficulties. And in red, it's when it was actually impossible to access some parts of the conference. So to try to interpret what we can see in the charts, so in the three comments, we can read that actually the vast majority of troubles were about the difficulty or impossibility for virtual attendees to interact with the conference. So this is mostly about the experience of virtual attendees. Also, just about on-site attendance, some comments were mentioning how overstimulating it can be to attend the conference on-site. Next slide. So here we see a list of what people appreciated at CHI, and in particular sign language, captions, the fact that there was a quiet room in the conference center, and childcare for families. So these are things that were particularly appreciated. We also collected some suggestions about what could be improved. And in particular, people want a better experience for virtual attendance, no surprise here, a larger range of food on site with clear indications about what is in the food. And they would also like more seats and areas to relax when attending on site. Next slide. So here are questions related to transportation. On the top left, we can see that almost half of attendees came by train, which is a lot. And during the conference, people were on foot or taking the train mostly. And this was very likely supported by the free passes to take public transportations that were distributed to attendees. And people actually were super positive about this initiative in their comments. Next slide. So then in the survey, we had a series that were specific to some venues, and I report just here what were the most significant in the comments. So it actually relates to something I mentioned before. So some people actually had trouble to see some posters or demos in the hall, so for on-site attendees. And they report that the hall was quite crowded. The layout of booths and activities was considered not optimal, and the time reserved to posters and demos in the program was not sufficient. Next slide. So here is a final question that is likely of interest. So here we can see answers to that question, which was CHI 24 will be physically in Hawaii. How likely is it that you will attend? And people are quite split here. So half of them answered that they would like to go, or that they will very likely go. But the other half said that they won't go or will attend virtually. And in the three comments, people expressed concerns about the carbon footprints, the time and cost it takes to travel there, and the fact that local communities in Hawaii do not encourage tourism. And next slide, I will finish with that slide that actually gives some demographically related information about who were the respondents to our survey. So I leave it to you to look at the details. And thank you, that's it. I hand it over to Neha.
Thank you for that. And I don't know if you mentioned this already, but you did mention that you would put these in a blog post, right? Because there was a question about seeing these in writing. So thank you so much for that. Okay, next we have our open calls and just information about CHI 25 from one of the chairs.
Just one moment. I'm going to stop sharing and reshare to make sure the sound's going to pull through.
I think you need to click on the little button for the sound.
Got it. Perfect.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. This is Vanessa from the Dapper duo, Naomi and Vanessa. We are the general co-chairs for CHI 2025 and wanted to give you a little update on the conference 2025 and also to introduce our open call for volunteers. So CHI 2025 will be in Yokohama, and it'll be from Saturday, the 26th of April until Friday, the 1st of May. I know it's very hard to see here on this picture now that I'm hovering over it with my big head, in 2025. And the workshops will be from the Saturday, the 26th and Sunday, the 27th. As you can see, Yokohama is a beautiful city. It's not so very far from Tokyo, and the venue is absolutely wonderful where we will have our conference sessions, but also we really strive to have a good remote attendance, especially in light of sustainability, but more on that at a later date. This is an embarrassing slide, so I will go over it quickly, but basically this is Naomi and myself, your co-chairs, and we are very happy to serve you in organizing this conference, and we are really hoping that this conference can be groundbreaking in the sense that it hopefully can be most sustainable, most inclusive, most caring, most fun, and of course super high quality. These are our technical program chairs, Sharon Ding of University of Glasgow and Koji Yatani from University of Tokyo. The technical program of CHI is always something really special. There's a lot of moving pieces, so this is really a big job. We are so thankful to both of them to take on this job, and they are just wonderful, wonderful people. Here you can see our paper chairs, Marcini Chetty, University of Chicago, Bongxing Li, Microsoft Research, and Phoebe Dugas from New Mexico State University. And these guys are really wonderful people, amazing people. Papers is a tough event to organize at CHI, and these guys are just so super qualified and so capable. We're just extremely in awe and honored that they are willing to help us out in the conference, and they will surely do an amazing job. So our many thanks go to them. And then here you have our open call for volunteers. This will open by July 31st. Please note that the associate chairs and the subcommittee chairs will be recruited through a different process. There will be a separate call at the beginning of 2024 in PCS, and that will be distributed through the SIGCHI member list and also social media channels. So please, if you would like to volunteer to CHI 2025, then this is the link you can use, the SurveyMonkey link, or the code you could scan to do so. We would love to have you join our little club, and we really hope to provide a wonderful experience to all volunteers that are interested to help out at CHI. I mean, of course, we all know volunteering is the backbone of CHI, and our utmost gratitude goes to all of you. Thank you so much. Bye bye for now. Hello.
Okay, great. So thank you, Vanessa, for watching. And that brings us to the end of today's town hall, but only the part that we had planned already. So now we have time, about 17 minutes, I think, for questions. So you can use the Slido link here, or you can just raise your hand. So there's a question in the chat that maybe if you could speak to about the committees being set for 24 and 25. Okay, so Julie already just answered, saying that CHI 24 is fully recruited.
I suspect Anai's talking about the papers committees, not necessarily the organizing committee. They can clarify if I'm wrong. For both, they're getting pretty well set. I would say that the papers committees, like your subcommittees, are still very much being put together for 25. They are probably almost already complete for 24, though Julie could really speak to that.
Yeah, so there's maybe a few AC positions. Some subcommittees have not finalized their recruitment, but in general, the open call has already come and gone. But of course, update your reviewing profile in PCS. That is the best way to get matched for reviews, and also one of the best ways to volunteer and get involved.
Thank you, Julie. I don't see any new questions in Slido. Okay, so Robert, do you want to just say your question out loud?
Oh, sure. I was just wondering if there was a blog post or will there be a blog post that gives more detail about the volunteer opportunities that were just announced? Maybe describe some of the open roles or the roles they're trying to look to fill. The way the form is set up right now, it kind of assumes that people already know what those opportunities are or what positions are available. I think this might be helpful to bring in new folks.
And that's for Chi 25?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that'd be up to the 25 chairs. It's a considerable amount of work to put that together. We can encourage them to. It's something we probably should have been doing for a while. It's been a challenge for a bit of like, for instance, what does a data chair do? What does what is the SGC chair? Things like that. Like there's a lot of ambiguity in those roles. So the kind of fleshing out a glossary of those roles probably is something the SC could do some more of.
Yeah, I mean, just to be more specific, like right now, question number 4 is what role or roles in Chi 2025 would you be interested in? E.g. co-chairing late breaking work, co-chair for accessibility, etc. Which is, if you know what those things mean and you know what etc. might mean, that makes a lot of sense. But
Thanks, Robert. And there's a comment from Amelia saying maybe recruit a volunteer for describing or interviewing people in the current roles. Anything else? So maybe I could ask Duncan and or Hauchuan to talk about the education question. Do you want to say more about that?
So Duncan, you're here, right? Duncan. Yeah, do you want to start first? Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to have got a lot of people's attention. So yeah, I mean, so there has been an education committee running for the last 5 years or so, and that term's just come to an end. So Olivia was the chair of that, and there's a blog post that's just about to be published outlining what they've been achieving there. A lot of it was around so SIGCHI, there's a workshop that's been taking place most years at Chi. But yeah, and then I've just been onboarded, enjoying this role very recently. So I think the first activity is to scope out what our aims are for the coming period and to recruit new members. I think that's the main thing I wanted to say there.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. Anything you want to add, Hauchuan? I did mention the courses that you're designing right now, but you could say more if you want.
Yeah, the education committee is right now in the shaping, in the making, right? So we are, just as Duncan say, we're going to formalize that, recruiting new members. I think it will, yeah, so we will announce that for sure, okay, and to let the community know. Another related but not on the same from is sort of mentoring effort. I think Neha said that at the beginning, is like we are hoping to help new volunteers to onboard and to know the SIGCHI values, to know the best practice, as smooth as possible. So we are planning a series of mini courses that will be released on our YouTube channel, like videos, 20-30 minutes, covering the review process, helping people to understand. And then we get a lot of newcomers every year, right? The community is growing, so we see a need for that, and we are working on that.
Thank you. There's also a question about support via our travel awards and the SDF. So I don't know if Luigi is still here, though I know that he had to leave a few minutes early. Also, I know that Susanna is not here, who's VP conferences, and she's also involved in this. Oh, Luigi, you are here.
Yeah, I'm still here for a few minutes. So yes, I replied. So thank you, Tsi, for the questions. So I think to know where Tsi it's coming from, because I remember a few applications from the development fund for UMAP and I think IUI, but
Yes.
yeah, yes, exactly. But anyway, the last couple 2-3 years, I think. But in any case, yes, we recently update the development fund, and we that is online, so you can surely read all the details. I'm not going to read them clearly now, but the point is that we try to avoid overlaps between the programs that we have, because again, we put money on each program, and so it doesn't make sense to put money for the same things on multiple programs on our perspective, given also that money are not, unfortunately, or not infinite. So the decision that we have is that the development fund will not support anything that any other program will support. That means that we have a program to support travel grants for SIGCHI conferences, that the Gary Mazen Travel Award. And currently, any conferences asking for travel grants to SIGCHI will receive there is the Gary Mazen Travel Award, invite people to apply there. I read that you say that traditionally there was a part of the budget that goes back to SIGCHI for covering these things. I don't approve the budgets, but for the budget, for the conferences budget I've seen, I don't think that there is no part anymore that go back to SIGCHI. The only things that go back to SIGCHI is overhead, but actually overhead goes to the SEM, not to SIGCHI. SIGCHI gets the revenues because we get the financial and legal responsibility for the entire conference. So if the conference get a loss, SIGCHI covers the loss. And if the conference get any revenue, SIGCHI get the revenue also to enable all these programs, the development fund, the Gary Mazen Travel Award, the program app, PCS, C-Event, etc., etc., etc. So that is the short answer. I see that you have your hand raised. So let's see if you want to.
Yeah, I've got a quick comment and question. If I'm not mistaken, 16% of the budget of the conference goes to SIGCHI, is allocated to SIGCHI. This is as far as I recall, part of the TMRF. If this
that
has
is
changed...
sorry, no, this is the overhead. This is the overhead. The overhead is also something that SIGCHI pay. Right, so the overhead is 16% for conferences now is a sort of, let's say, a taxation. Let's call it in this way. It's not technically a taxation, but it's an amount that the ACM asks every SIG to pay for every dollar that they spend, every dollar. So the conference, since the conference spend money and the conference, SIGCHI or any SIG conference, get these 16% overhead, but it's not something that SIGCHI keeps for them. It's something that SIGCHI gives to SEM, basically entirely to the SEM, because it's an SEM rule. It's not something that, I don't know if today, unfortunately or not, but it's not something that we keep from the conference. Absolutely. The only things that we keep in a way from the conferences are any revenue after the closing of the conference.
So let me just ask a quick question. Having a conference, you allocate the overhead for the SIGs, then you have a contingency fee. And the contingency fee is part of the budget, and you are expected to have a balanced budget that also gives the contingency fee to the ACM, in fact. And what happens if I'm finding myself eating parts or almost all of the contingency fee? Does it hurt the workshop, the conference?
No. So if you have 50% contingency fee, so the contingency fee should be for covering unexpected expenses, right? So if you have, let's say, $10,000 of contingency fee, let's put a number, and you need those amount to run the conference to cover an expected change, you can use that. The important thing is, again, is that, well, the requirement, let's say, is not to get, it's not a requirement. The ideal thing is not to get a loss.
Okay, so I just want to make a quick comment because we just finished UMAP 23 today. And we had a debate, a long discussion about hybrid conferences. 70% voted in favor of in-person conference with exceptions for inclusion, but strong support for in-person conference. That's my 2 cents here.
That this is not related to clearly to the other part, but yes, thank you. I think that there will be, so there are SCC meeting for the vice chair of the steering committee, and I think that could be a wonderful moment to share among the conferences pros and cons of the various approach, and also sharing doubts and questions, and within the steering committee chairs and also with us. We organized, I think, one every month. I'm not involved in the organization, but I think there is Nea, one every month.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So thank you, Sri, for sharing. What you shared may not be relevant to the budget particularly, but it is relevant for our hybrid working group. And we are talking exactly about this. So over the last year, we're going to be checking in with all of our conferences to see what they've been offering for hybrid. And so if you've had that conversation with your conference, I think that's great. That would be great info to have. Thank you. We have 4 minutes. Okay. So Amelia says, please continue to develop virtual attendance options. Thank you for your input. I didn't see any other questions on Slido. So if we don't have any others here, then I think we are done 4 minutes early. Thank you all for joining.